Um, my friend Swami C, Swami Chidbrahmananda is with us, and he comes from the Vedanta Center in Silver Spring. He was raised as a Christian in Texas and other parts of the world. I think his family traveled a lot, and then discovered his vocation as a Vedantist. He spent a lot of time at Holy Cross Monastery that's dear to some of us. And so has the unique perspective and is able to have the unique insights into the merging of Vedanta and Christianity. And it's a wonderful thing to have you here, Swami C.
Thank you, Terry. Well, good morning. I'm going to come clean right away and tell you that this is the first time I'm giving a lecture for less than an hour. So I'm going to be trying to move rather quickly through this. I want to give you a few things about myself this morning. One, I'm of course a Swami of the Ramakrishna Order, which doesn't mean a whole lot to most people, but it's basically just that I've dedicated my life to finding truth, in the pursuit of love, really, and given up anything else. And I've been a monk now for 20 something years. I'm not a guru or a teacher in that sense of the word. I always want to tell people that I'm a cheerleader, and I would prefer that you view me that way this morning, that I find it my role in the play of the divine to just cheer you on in the path that you are on. From my own perspective, just to give you a basket to throw me into as I come along and share some things, some ideas. I no longer believe in the plural of religion. I believe that there is one religion, and that all of the sages, as early as the Rig Veda, which is the world's earliest scripture that we know of, he describes in that writing that the Sanatana Dharma, he calls it, the eternal religion or the eternal Dharma, the eternal right living, is a single gem, and that each facet of that gem is of one of the world's religions or a religion. And so through any one of the facets, the entire gem can be enjoyed, can be understood, can be seen, can be appreciated, but that no one facet of it is the gem, that the gem is always beyond any definition or beyond any particular facet. And so I come from that background, that idea. I did grow up as a Christian. I still consider myself a Christian, interestingly enough. I call myself a Vedic Christian, in the sense that really all that means is that I personally, and again, like I'm saying, none of this is to convince you of anything. I'm going to throw out a lot of ideas and fodder for ideas. You're welcome to accept anything that you like that I say, and you're welcome to reject anything that I say. And I'm open. There is no such thing as asking a wrong question or offending me by asking some particular question. So feel absolutely free in that regard. So in this, I want to jump to the very beginning of time and kind of walk us through a perspective that I find unique about what the relationship is between us, the world, the perceived world, the divine, the beloved, his spokesman or his manifestation to us, the manifestation of the word, and kind of draw it all into a singular perspective. And that's why I'm shivering a little bit at the idea of doing this in 30 minutes. So let's start. We'll go to one of my favorite passages in the Bible, in the book of John. He says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind." Now, he lays out some very interesting things here that I missed for the first 25 years of my Christian walk. And that's in that first sentence there, where the Word was with God and the Word was God. he's pointing out there a paradigm that has puzzled the sages going all the way back to the world's oldest scriptures. This seemingly contradictory notion of being something and being with something, that one that's seemingly two but is really a one. The ancient sages say that the world resolves back into a singular unity, very much like the unity Jesus prays for, actually, which we'll go over a little bit later on in the lecture, where we give up that sense of separateness and fold back into our divine nature. It says that through him all things were made, and that nothing was made that wasn't in him. So, this is open to interpretation, but the way that I generally see it in light of world scripture is this notion that we live, breathe, and have our being in the divine, that God is one without a second, that if he is omnipresent, I will have a very difficult time finding the boundary where I begin and God ends, that there is a unity in all things, and that when it is seen from that perspective of no ego, no me and mine, that unity, that singularity becomes obvious to us. All right, so we are basically this first sentence there where he says the word was God and the word was with God. You tie that with the idea that we were created in the image of God. So we are actually a reflection of the divine. Our being comes from that first sentence. You have awareness, which is God himself, the I am. And you have the awareness of awareness, God with God. And that is the devotee and the beloved. That is the duality that we live in. So the thing that broke the world into other than God is this notion of the word being with God. And the thing that brings it into its unity beyond manifestation in the end, or as it is perhaps always when we're no longer ignorant, is the first part where the word is God. So we come back into that relationship, or from that relationship to that unity. And that is the point of life. The point of life is to find that unity with the beloved again, to bring ourselves back to that oneness. And so what is it to be the image or to be this reflection of God? I used to wrestle with that quite a bit. If I was brought up in a very fundamentalist tradition where that meant that, God looked and felt like I did, that he was actually a person, very much like Michelangelo's painting in the Sistine Chapel, reaching down with his finger to touch me as I feebly reach up to find him. And that's how I understood it. As I've grown older now, I see it as a reflection that the universe as a whole is actually the reflection of the divine living in me. And that divinity, as it shines through my mind with the impurities of the idea of me and mine, me having an existence separate and apart from God, gives birth to this multiplicity that we experience, where we call things not God, where we actually believe that there's a material world that is somehow separate and apart from our beloved Father in heaven. So God has created us in his own image. And we know that from what? From Genesis 3, from the very beginning, where he breathed that breath of life into us. And I'm going to start right there with that idea of when God breathed that breath into us, and we then shortly after that get the idea of the Garden of Eden, that actually at every moment, the story of the Garden of Eden is happening. The Garden of Eden is not a historical one-time story of when it all began. I'm suggesting to you that this world is created moment to moment, and that your creation happens with each inhalation that you take, that is God breathing that divinity, breathing that life into you, because if that doesn't happen, your lifespan's very short. It comes to a close very quickly. And the experience of the Garden of Eden is cyclical and is happening continually within us, and is the reason that we experience the world as we do, where God seems to be somewhere else and we seem to be here. Now, this nature of God, I want to look into the nature of the divine to see if I am created in that image, if I am actually the image of God reflected back to him. What does that mean for me? What is my nature? Who am I? Is what the profoundest question we can ask is. What is this experience of being? And why? It's the fundamental surge in life. Well, we know three things about God that are consistent in all the world's scriptures. The Buddhists, that they have a little bit of a different approach to it, but I could say arguably very much the same ideas up until the point of what exists when nothing exists. Is it nothing or is it everything? Would be the only point of departure. But in general, God is seen as, number one, being love, of course, right? We know that 1 John 4:8, that God is love. So he actually is love. God is unchanging. God is always the same. Psalms 55, and then again in Malachi 3. And there's other little places in the Bible where it sort of hints at that idea of this unchanging nature of God as the transcendent reality, the God beyond attribute, as it were. God is all knowledge, omniscient, right? We're very comfortable with that word. And God is existence itself. God is the I am. The earliest name that we find in the scripture is God telling Moses, I am. Tell him that I am has sent you. So God has put those things, with the exception of the changing, in us. That one we're going to play with a little bit, because that's that toggle switch that we run into in John 1 there, that awareness and awareness of awareness, or the word being God and the word being with God. So we're going to look at that here in just one moment. So our nature is love. That's why almost every poem, every song, every movie, every novel seems to have love somewhere in and around it. That love is that one defining feature of all things. And actually, if you've heard of Eckhart Tolle, he's one of my favorite writers. He says that in one of his first spiritual experiences, spiritual awakenings, that one of the most profound things that he saw, not a metaphor of it, but actually experienced or saw, realized in that terminology, was that light and love were the same. That light's not a metaphor of love, but light actually is love. And that's one of my favorite things to contemplate sometimes when I'm feeling kind of a little disconnected from things, to sit there and become aware of all of the light that's around me, and to see that as the embrace of the divine, to see that as what it means to live, breathe, and have my being in the divine, in God, in that embrace of love, that light everywhere, being the love of God, which sustains the universe, gives it light, right? The root of all living things is fire, is that light of love, that nothing exists without it. If the skies go dark, there is no life on earth. Everything would end very quickly for us. So that love, ever presence, that being, that isness, the I am that is within me. The only difference between our I am, and this is that toggle switch piece there, is that we like to string attributes onto our I am. God is the pure being. There is no limitation or restriction in the divine. So that's why his name is I am. That there is nothing following it, or everything follows it. You can take either perspective and be accurate. Because when you come to an absolute unity, when you come to that one without a second, there are no attributes, because there is no observer. The observer, the experience, and the observed are one. They are not separate anymore. So you have that infinite being beyond any description, beyond any ability of the mind to comprehend or hold. And we have that intelligence within us. Now, it's interesting to know that what's being pointed at this idea of being aware and this awareness of awareness is this notion of change. The only thing that we don't seem to have as the quality of God is being unchanging. But the sages say that our highest realization, when we get the most intimate with the beloved, we understand that as well, that we were not the dreamed, that we have always been the dreamer. Now, what do I mean by that? I always love the idea of the talking about the dream, in the sense that when you're the dreamer, you have a different body. You can be anything, and that body can do anything. It can fly. It can, it can be no sex or both sexes, or it can be combinations. Sometimes it can be in this room and instantly be in the next room. And within the context of the dream, everything flows, everything is fine. So we have identified our being with a dream body in that dream that is completely ignorant of the unchanging dream body, as it were, that's laying in the bed asleep. The dream body that's not running away from the gangsters behind us on the city street. The dream body in the bed that has a very defined gender and a defined job and is actually at this point sleeping, and not sharing any of our awareness in the dream of being active, running, accomplishing things, doing things. And so that separation is what we're experiencing in this life, that there's this ignorance in us, this identity that we have had with a body and a mind that is constantly changing, that there's nothing permanent in the body. And if I wanted to attach my I am to a body, I would run into that problem immediately, because my body is nothing the same as it was 56 years ago when I was born. I would dare say that there's not a single cell the same that has followed me all the way through. And yet it's still me. I'm still carrying the same name. So who is and what is this I am, that gives me this continuity of life in the face of the material world not being able to substantiate that claim? And it comes to the mind as well. How often, how much has my mind changed? My mind literally changes from moment to moment, and yet constantly there's a sense of I within that is aware of my thinking, aware of the changes, can see what's going on in the world and within its own mind. And so the sages propose that this sense of I, this I am that is unchanging within us, is our real nature, that is the God, that is the divine, the beloved, who is being reflected in our mind through our body. That I is our real nature, is really who we are. And our work, our spiritual work, our relationship with the divine is to rid ourselves of any sense of separateness from that beloved I, so that we can reach that state that Paul writes about, where he says, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives through me. That we become a door through which God manifests in the world. That it doesn't run through the mind, and it doesn't run through our mill of desires, cravings, likes and dislikes, but that it bypasses all of that because we've purified ourselves of ego, purified ourselves of decisions made on the identity of being a body, purified ourselves of making decisions based on moods and states of mind, and are able then to directly be that window through which the light of God purely shines, without a smaller identity that takes care of itself only at the neglect of others. And so how did we get to this point? How did we come to this strange situation? This is where I believe that God is trying to teach us through the story of the Garden of Eden. That many of the realized sages, and I'll say that with quotes if you want them, these realized sages who have had this unitive experience with the beloved, and even the many of the Catholic, I know St. John of the Cross, and certainly St. Teresa of Avila talk about this unitive experience. Now, quite often at the end of their paragraph, they'll kind of bring it back down to keeping themselves separate, because that was the only acceptable way of speaking about it in their time. But certainly the experiences that they describe, the things that they talk about, point absolutely at that oneness. St. John actually goes on and says it's like he's a piece of glass. You can't see him at all. And the sun, who is the light, the solar sun, is behind that piece of glass shining through. So he keeps himself separate as a piece of glass that has no attributes of his own and no separation of his own. And you don't know that he's there except that he's told you he's there. So that may be that case if you want to live in a world that's eternally dual. Totally fine. No problem with that at all. Otherwise, you can just remove the glass. You're not going to know the difference, and say that he has fallen into that unity. And so in the Garden of Eden, it says that the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit from the trees of the garden, but God did say you can't eat the fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, that you must not even touch it or you will die. You will die, you will experience death, right? We come to that verse, the wages of sin is death. So this notion of God, of being in the garden, you're in perfect unity. There are not two wills in the Garden of Eden in its perfected state. There's one will, the will of God. And all things from that perspective are allowable, right? Even St. Paul says, all things are lawful. It's just that not all things are helpful. Helpful for what? Some things are going to take you into the world of duality, to the idea of separation from God, and some things are going to bring you back to that unity. So if you look at the world in that perspective, if you define your ethics as being those things which take you into multiplicity, desire, hatred, anything that's an aversion or an attraction, is going to take you further into that duplicity, and that's going to be what the Bible lists in all of the elements of sin. What is all of the ideas of sin are things that take you or pull you away from that unity into a world of diversity. All the things that bring you back to that union, self-control, patience, love, not keeping account of wrongs, all of the qualities of love found in 1 Corinthians 13, those things bring you toward the beloved. They are the helpful things that Paul is referring to. So we're seeing here that in the Garden of Eden was this potential for going through the senses into the world of multiplicity, for forming a will that sees and views itself as separate from the divine will. That one decision that Eve made, and then Adam eagerly followed her in, was to create a space for their own existence separate and apart from God's will, where they would have a will of their own, a will based on the senses, right? And the first thing that takes from there is the forgetfulness. They forget that they are already God. He says, for God knows that, the Satan is telling Eve, for God knows that when you eat of this fruit, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So they just earlier in that chapter, they had been created in the image of God. They were already like God. They had all of the qualities of the beloved, of the divine. And here Satan steps in and says, hey, I can make you like God, right? You're not already full. You're not already perfect. You're not already one. You're lacking something. And you see, when we make that first decision to identify with body, to identify with mind, we, that infinite I am, the reflection of that infinite being, which is self-contained, always content, full of bliss, all-knowing, ever-present, we step into a finite container. And suddenly, this notion of our infinity is hungry. Suddenly, this notion of oneness needs acceptance, needs love, needs. And it goes on and on and on. So that's the first step to our delusion, is believing that this is me, forgetting that I am spiritual in nature, forgetting that I am a soul. I identify with the limited structures of my dream. And suddenly, whoosh, I'm no longer the man or woman asleep in the bed. I am now a dream character in a whole world being created as I walk from moment to moment, as God breathes that continual life of his own divine breath into me. And so I live in a dream world, right? And it says that after he had just told her, oh, if you eat of this fruit, she says, when the woman saw the fruit of the tree, that it was good for food and pleasing to the eye and desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. And she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. So the two of them ate it. What did they eat? They went through the senses to achieve their divinity. They went through the senses to achieve their oneness. They went through their senses to achieve their sense of being, their sense of separation from God. You can see that. Why? Because she looks at the fruit, and the first thing she sees, oh, look, it's beautiful. She sees that attraction. Ah, that's wonderful. And not realizing that all beauty comes from within us, right? All beauty is something that's reflected back to us. It doesn't come from things outside of us. Otherwise, we would all find the exact same things beautiful, and we don't. We all have our own defined senses of beauty because it's a reflection of the clarity within us. The more clear that we are, the more we rid ourselves of me and mine and those ideas, the more beautiful everything becomes. The more selfish we become, the aversions and attractions we have, and it becomes more and more defined and more particular. And that's the reason that God just tells you up front. He says, you know what, save your sex for marriage. If you just go out and start playing around, your needs are going to get more and more specific. Your focus is going to become more and more on being the body and experiencing the body. And because of that experience, the world is going to break into thousands of things. Rich people, poor people, fat people, skinny people, good-looking people, genders of all natures and all varieties. It's just going to keep getting more and more full of the multiplicity. And you're going to become more and more specific in what you need in order to have your experience, or that flick of oneness with God. Because all enjoyment in the world is a manifestation of the divine. But if you think it's the temporary things giving it to you, then you become an eternal beggar. You have to go to the senses constantly to get your fulfillment. And as soon as the conditions change, your happiness is gone and your oneness doesn't exist anymore. All desire is for God. As soon as we know that, we have our bliss, because God is present within us. His reflection is what we are. As soon as we think that our desire is for something separate from God, then we're hungry and eternally hungry, because we've created a sense of self separate and apart from the real, which means we become unreal. And when we live in the place of being unreal, you are eternally insecure. You will never have enough of anything because there's nothing there. It's just like eating in a dream. You can eat as much as you want in the dream. When you wake up, you're going to weigh the same as you did when you went to bed. Not going to make any difference. That's the nature of this world. That's the nature of living in the body and the mind. Nothing can feed you. Nothing can fill you. Nothing can bring you happiness, because it is unreal. It's based on a sense of self, which is false, which is not true. So we don't go through the senses for our defining ourselves. We don't go through our senses to find our fulfillment. We don't go through our senses to find our satisfaction. We turn our eyes inward. We come to look, you try and find that in yourself which is not changing. That's the big hint that many of the world scriptures give. If it changes, it's not real. If it's unchanging, it's real. So when you sit there as a person praying, at first in our prayers, God is separate, and we have our petitions, and please do this, and I'm scared of this, and I want this, and I need that. But in mature prayer, St. Teresa of Avila says that it becomes a communion, like two old people who've been married their whole life. There's no more stories to tell. There's no more to know about each other. You've been together for 70 years. Everything is known. And at that point, it's enough just to be together, just to know the presence. And that is mature prayer, where there's no vocalizing, there's no separateness. It's simply a commingling with the beloved, with the divine. So we try and return to that space. So the way you can see this is see the mind as being the surface of a lake, and see God being a full moon suspended above this lake. If the mind is absolutely placid, your view of God as one without a second will be pure and full and beautiful, wonderful. But if that mind or if that lake gets rippled, then God, or the moon, the reflection, will break into 1,000 pieces. You will no longer see a singular moon. You'll see shards of white that are flickering and changing everywhere, that hold almost no semblance to the moon in its unity hanging in the sky. That you, which is standing on the shore, is the I am. That mind is the mind of God. You can say it's the word if you want to. When the word vibrates, it's no longer the part that is God. It's now the part that's with God. So when that ripple of the lake flickers, you have left the oneness with God, and you've entered into the awareness of awareness. You've entered into the word being with God. You, the mini manifestation of the word, the impure manifestation of the word, are then unable to see the unity of all things. So what is it that ripples that world? What is it that ripples that world? It's me and mine. Anything that's me and mine. If you try and take ownership of anything, whether it's a thought or whether it's an object, whether it's an identity or a mood, if you say I and connect it to that thing, you are in ignorance. And the more you believe it, the more you try and enact it, the more lost you become, because things just keep proliferating more and more and more, more and more and more. You're going away from that unity. And so we come to understand that we actually live in a mind and not a world. That's why you can't distinguish when you're in a dream, you can't distinguish that from reality, because it's in the same mind as the reality that you're holding on hold while you sleep. That place you return to, that other level of consciousness. So the dreaming world is just as real to us while we're in it. And interestingly enough, when we come out of it into our waking state, that higher place of consciousness, the dream seems nonsensical. We don't have anybody who studies the physics of dreams. Why? Who would? We don't have anybody that studies the geography of dreams or the political states within dreams. Why? Because we know them to be unreal. And see, when we come to that understanding of God as one without a second, this world appears very much the same to us, nonsensical and uninteresting, because we are full and complete in our knowledge that we are love, existence, intelligence, absolute, unchanging, never born, ever free. We come to this through the Christ, because through the Christ we can break that cycle of payment and reward. The world of duality is maintained by a constant sense of indebtedness and a need to pay back, or the sin and forgiveness, if you want. And we can never get that from ourselves, because the mind itself has a function within it to keep track of all of that. And we need a way to transcend mind, to get ourselves to be able to let go of that sense. And that sense of grace is there. We see it in a very interesting place. When the disciples try to do a miracle and they're not able to do it, they're not able to drive the evil spirit out in Matthew 17, they said to Jesus, why can't we do this? If God is one, I'm going to reframe their context a little bit. If God is one, why can't we see it? Why can't we get there? And he answered, truly, I tell you, if you have faith the size of the mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible. So moving a mountain into the water, if that's not big enough, you can get bigger. Move the sun into a thimble. You can do whatever you want. He says nothing will be impossible. Why? Because we live in a mind and not a world. There is no reality. But because we are fully convinced by this adopted identity of self as a body and mind, we are restricted. The faith he's talking about is for you to start believing the things that you internally know, that you're eternal. How do you know that you're eternal? Where did you learn the idea of eternal? Where did we get that word from? There is no example of eternal in the manifested world. There is nothing that lasts forever. If we only got our knowledge from outside of ourselves, from the world out there, big quotes, we would not know or have the concept of eternal or of infinite. And yet we do. It's something we implicitly know. It is your nature that you are infinite. It is your nature that you will not die. It is your nature that you're all-knowing, that you are love itself. And that's why you're identifying yourself with the limited and restricted has made you hungry and made you long for more. And he's saying, have faith the size of a mustard seed. That is for a moment. Trust what you know deep, deep within. Now you have to do a lot of clearing away to find out what that mustard seed is. It's pretty deep and dark in some of us. And so you have to really do those things. You have to obey the scriptures. You have to purify your life. Why? Because those are things that remove the dust from the mirror within you that's reflecting your beloved and will bring you back to that oneness. And so in John 17, Jesus points that picture out to us. He says, I have given them the glory you gave me, the wonder, the dream, the beauty of existence, of living, of manifesting, of being a vibration of the word, that he has given us that glory, this marvelous moment of being, which is the I am, which doesn't change, is always present, right? That's one of my favorite lectures. I can't give it now, but this whole notion that this moment is God. This is your being, this I am. The thing that allows you to say I am is the presence of God holding you up. And in that moment is wonder and beauty. There is no past. The past is the line in the water, your memory, holding on to something you should have let go of. You applied to me and mine, you liked it, you wanted it, and you tried to take something out of the world that was passing, unreal, ephemeral, and you tried to share your immortality with it by remembering it, holding on to it. So you have a sense of a past. And that created you a hunger in you. So you're not able to see the fullness of the moment anymore. You're now hungry because you have a memory of things that you thought were real, that you wanted to hold on to, that has made you hungry. And out of that hunger, you have to come up with a plan of how to manifest the thing you think you're missing. And that's your sense of the future laying out there. And so all of us are spending our life bouncing back and forth between future and past, between our desires and our attachments, back and forth, boom, 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 never able to see the beauty and wonder and glory of being. This moment, full, no need. All of the needs and desires we have belong to either the body or the mind. You can only say 3 things about yourself. And this is always a good test for whether you should engage in what you're feeling or not. You can say 3 things. I exist. You can say that. I love. You can say that. I'm intelligent. You can say that. Those are the 3 things you are allowed to say that are true about you. Anything else that you try to attach to that I is false. It's a lie. In Christian terminology, it comes from Satan. I'm angry. No, you're not. The mind is angry. You are never angry. I'm hungry. No, you're not. The body is hungry. You have never known hunger. You know, I'm tired. No, the body is tired, or maybe the mind is tired, but you are infinite and ever free, not beholden to anything. So you can always use that test. I am love, I exist, and I'm intelligent right there. And if you want to know what I am love is, sit there and read 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 8, and put I in for everywhere love occurs. That's how you practice being or returning to the union. That's how you practice manifesting your beloved, right? And if you don't know who your beloved is, then go through there and take out the word love and put God in there for each there. And that will remind you who your beloved is, who your ideal is, and what you're trying to let out of the gate instead of the multiplicity that's coming from the mind and body and the confusion that you are dancing with in this world of change. So he says, I've given them the glory.
Sorry. I was just going to say, Swami, if you could finish up, I think there's going to be so many questions because this is so interesting, but I want to give people a chance. Go ahead.
Half a verse, just the rest of the verse. I in them and you in me, that they may be perfectly united. So see, that image of God is Jesus within you. And the manifestation, the acting, the verb of God is the word when he's with God. The noun of God is Jesus when he's beyond, when he is the eternal Christ, the Christ that doesn't have a personality, that Christ who is the absolute, that Christ who is inseparable from the Father, the oneness, that isness of being. I and them and you and me, that they may be perfectly united. Perfectly united means there is no seam anywhere in there. There is no boundary where I begin and God ends. It was a lie of my attachment to having a separate me that was not God. That they may know that you sent me and have loved them just as you have loved me. That our practice of love is what will bring us to that unity with our beloved, the unity of the world, the unity of all things, returning once again to the word that has always been beyond manifestation. All right.
Wow. Thank you so much, Swami C. So for those of you who'd like to either unmute to ask a question or to write it in the chat, Um, that was incredibly stimulating, Swami C. There's a couple questions are already there. One's for me, and then also, I think Dwayne has. Well, why do we have senses then? What's their purpose? And mine was similar to that also, and that is you mentioned at the beginning about light as not being a representation of love, but being its actuality. And it seems to me that like so many of the things that we do know, like for instance, patience is something that I teach, I think, to my children, and my children teach to me through like actually having to sense moments of like frustration and like anyway. So like how, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so our first question is the unanswerable question. Why God has created us in the first place? Why did he do this? There really is not an answer to that question. The question is yours. Why are you here? Because you could return to the beloved any time. You know, you can have this unitive experience with God. It's available to everybody at any time. Why do you hold on to your body? Why do you love it so much? Why do you hold on to your personality? Why do you love it so much? It's a question we have to answer about ourselves. And you know, the sages, they kind of cheat a little bit. The general response to that, with a little smile of knowing, is it's God's play. The Sanskrit word lila, that God is experiencing herself or himself, that God is just enjoying being God, you know, as such. So there's quote bigger than the universe around that statement, but you know, in general, that's the idea.
Right on. Would anybody else like to unmute and ask a question? Yeah, Alice.
Hi. I had two questions. One is, if I understood Swami correctly, he was saying that we shouldn't have memories necessarily. And I have memories of a dear friend who died years ago, and that's how I keep her alive. And I thought I was hearing him say, that's not something that we necessarily should be doing.
Okay. Yes and no. All right. What your friend was to you is a reflection of love. And your memory is trying to grab that reflection of love. So you're wanting to hold on to an image in a mirror when actually the love in that relationship that makes you remember your friend was within you. She was reflecting because of certain attributes or certain connections that you had through body and mind. You were reminded of certain aspects of the list of love, and she was manifesting them to you more clearly than other people do for you because of your state of being. So the thing is that not that you can't do it. All things are lawful, Paul says. You certainly can, but not all things are helpful. Why? Because your friend's not with you anymore. So there's that sense of pain that accompanies that attachment, that memory. Better to know that that friend never died. That friend was never born. And that friend was a reflection, a flicker of the image of God that's already within you. And to love her, you were loving the divine. You were loving just a shard of the divine, a certain aspect of the divine that she happened to reflect back to you in a particular way. If it was actually her that had that quality and she was actually giving something to you, then everybody who looked at her would feel the same way. The whole world would be her friend in the same way that you are her friend. But it's not, because she's only a reflection, and that relationship was only a reflection of the divine qualities that are yours because of your oneness with the divine. And so they say, don't attach to things that change because of the accompanying misery. Nothing out there will last. Nothing out there will stay with you eternally. Only the beloved is eternal, only your own nature. So understand that it was not your friend that you loved as your friend, that it was God that you loved through your friend. And that when that body fell, nothing happened. It was just like the dream went away, it vanished, but the sleeper is still fully present. And all of the love that you associated with that relationship is still yours to enjoy. And you're welcome to bring up the image of your friend anytime to help you touch and experience and see that love in a manifested way. But don't attach to the memory of the friend. Know that she was doing you a favor by just providing you a pinhole through which you can experience your beloved, the divine nature within. And when you come to that knowledge of the divine nature that's being reflected in all things around you, you don't need the ephemeral anymore. You can let go, and you can be one with the beloved and have that joy infinitely multiplied, that relationship infinitely multiplied, and not be held to the effervescent nature of a memory.
Got another comment here, and I wondered if this might tie into some of your personal experience, Swami C, also about how kind of growing up in a more fundamentalistic religious community where truth is only in like one thing, like one slice, and everything else is false. And it seems now that you have this almost inverse perspective, like God is in everything, kind of tied everywhere. Almost an inversion of that perspective. Is that, do you see it that way? Yeah.
Well, I was, I was kind of, when you go to the store and you try on a shirt and it doesn't fit, you put on another one. And until you find a shirt that's, I don't like the way that's going to go, but you find one that fits. But this works if you keep the mind pure, because you don't want to go. It's not that one religion is right and one religion is wrong. It's that God is feeding everybody the food that they can digest at the moment that they're eating it. That he is slowly bringing everybody forward into a knowledge of oneness. And so we don't move from wrong to right. We move from a lesser truth to a higher truth. And so I do not deny the truth of my upbringing within its own context. It was helpful within its own context. It brought me the idea of God. It brought me the idea of right and wrong. It brought me the idea of discipline. It brought me the idea of love. That it provided the things I needed at that time. But when I grew up and got some teeth, as it were, I could eat and digest different ideas of the beloved without diminishing the things that I had already learned. So it's not that we have to be careful, because it's not that God is everything, so I can go do everything I want. I mean, you can, but you're going to get hurt really badly if you don't know the nature of God, so that you can do it without the ignorance of being an I. What I'm talking about here is like, if I tell you your freedom, you're absolutely free. Your first point of reference for what to do with freedom is to ask your mind, what do you want? Ask your body, what do I want? What do I want to do? What do I want to eat? Where do I want to go? You see, you immediately go and query the body and mind because you don't have any notion of who you are. The real freedom is to want nothing, that you don't have to do anything. There is no lack at all. So your answer to be free is to accept everything as perfect as it is, because you know the divine nature of all things and the nature of the reality to be that unchanging divine, which is only flickering through the senses. So just that, I would say, keep that perspective, that we don't move from wrong to right, that we move from lower truth to higher truth, and that we grow in these notions. God keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger until there's no me anymore.
Yeah, somebody else like to interject. Ludley.
I'll climb in. Thank you very much. I'm intrigued. I have attempted on a number of occasions to to come to a similar place, or a place in which I can't remember quite how you said it in the very beginning, but the notion that there is a single truth or a singleness of, I think you said you no longer subscribe to the plurality of religions. And yeah, and I found, as I've tried to work my way toward that different religions articulate quite significantly different end places, that try as I might, a Christian notion of heaven and a Buddhist understanding of enlightenment, for me to have them end up being the same place obligates me to do some harm to one or both along the way. And therefore I've backed away from that pursuit. And I'm aware that, at least as I was hearing you, that you have posited God, and so if there is, which is that, that works for me, but if I were somebody who had not received or did not accept theism, then am I just not yet far enough along, which I then get wary of because that feels judgmental. So I don't know if I got a question in there. I'm just musing aloud.
Well, there's definitely a lot of ideas in here. When I say the unity of religion, I'm saying that they all posit the same problem, that we conceive of ourselves as separate and apart from God. That's the universal problem. Now, with the Buddhists, quite often people say, "Oh, Buddhism is atheistic." It's not. It's theist neutral. Buddha was a Hindu, was a Vedantist, and came to his enlightenment through Vedantist practices. And at his time, he was a reformer within Hinduism, in the sense that at the time, Hinduism had become quite calcified with Brahmanism, and the ruling priest caste was using religion in order to maintain their privilege and their very comfortable place in society. And so Buddha came along and used a completely different set of vocabulary, even though he knew the Sanskrit words and he knew the Hindu references for teaching what he taught. He did not want to bring to light the wrong associations that had been attached to those words, and came up with a whole new set of dialogues for his teaching. Furthermore, he got pushed out of India. And so there was always a large, I'm going into another question. I'm sorry, I'm getting caught up in something I like to talk about. More what's important for where we're going is to know that when I say the same in all religions, it's not necessarily that you can draw a single line between all of the different concepts of religion and say they're all the same. I don't ascribe to that. All religions are a form of scaffolding for reaching the divine, and depending on the nature of your problems, the nature of your delusion, that scaffolding is going to be different from building to building, from person to person. But they're all still designed for the same purpose, with the same end goal in mind, and that we shouldn't get too caught up with scaffolding, but keep in mind the most important things: love God, love one another, be unselfish, be loving. That if we keep our eyes on the one most important thing, we will see that unity in all things, and it is, after all, the most important thing. And you can see that if you were to hang a sheet of paper in the middle of the room, and one side would be yellow and one side would be blue, all the people standing on the blue side are going to say that piece of paper is blue, and all the other people are going to say that piece of paper is yellow, and you're going to sit there and fight and have a war and get really angry with each other because I can clearly see that it's blue. But the fact is, for them, they can clearly see that it's yellow because of their position of experience, their position of body and mind. And when we come from perspectives that are determined by body and mind, we will see difference always. But we can always agree that, yes, there is a piece of paper there. And if you say it's yellow, I need to talk to you and learn from you until I can find the place that you're standing, and then look up with your eyes and see, oh, wow, yes, that sheet of paper is in fact yellow. But I'm going to have to move out of my instantaneous insistence that I am right. I, as a body and mind, with my experience and my knowledge, am right, and you with yours are wrong, you know? And so that's the wrestling. None of us knows God. And until we give up being ourselves, we won't. And we'll always have infinite opinions about it. And those infinite opinions will change within us as we grow and as we move toward that one. It's not important that we be right. It's important that we know God, you know, that we fall in love with God.
Would you say that about senses, though, Swami C? What you just said, would you say that about senses?
You can say it about senses, but the senses are not a thing. They are
that part. That's what I mean. Would you say that you could be wrong about the senses not being a thing? Would you say that?
Yeah, sure. I could be wrong. Nobody's come to the unitive experience, though, while believing their senses were real. You know, so that would be the thing. None of the world's scriptures that have lasted through the thousands of years teach that the senses are real and that they're a source of truth. None of them. So you can make that experiment, and that experiment has been made. There's the Charvaka school of thought that was born in India. It was materialism, that the senses are real. They are the source of truth. And they died out. They lost all of their arguments and their debates. And there's still a few of them left. But that line of thinking over the thousands of years of questioning didn't sustain, didn't last the test of time. But yes, absolutely. I mean, any of us, you know, until we're realized, nobody. That's why I don't promote myself as a teacher. You know, I'm not a realized soul. I'm a cheerleader, and so I'll take you wherever you're standing, you know, and cheer you on from there. Because from my perspective, you can get there from here. Wherever your here is, you can get there. And if you have earnestness, sincerity, God himself or herself will get you there. You know?
Well, that sounds like a great place to stop for now. Swami, we are honored by your presence, and honored to have you speak to us and to I found some of it challenging and just love that and really look forward. I know that you've been around here for a long time and look forward to like continuing interfaith conversations.
Surely.
And I also asked would you mind closing us in prayer? We'd be honored by that.
Absolutely. Beloved, please open our hearts, our minds, our awareness of the love that you were expressing through your beloved Jesus in the garden that night when he prayed for our unity, our perfect oneness with you, with love, with our being, to come to a place undiluted where we see clearly that light is love, that love becomes our motivation, becomes our only fulfillment, our only hope, our only goal, and that you might manifest in us in the same way that one day we might say what Paul said, that it is no longer I who live, but you who live in me, that beloved word, ever free, ever pure, all-knowing, eternal. And may this happen, Lord, by our faith and knowledge, our sincerity, and our earnestness to take the help of your manifestation in the Christ, as he may have appeared to us as our own personal avenue to you. This is our prayer in that name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Amen.
Swami. Thank you all for joining us. Everyone enjoys.
Can he tell
Thank
us
you.
where the C, what the C, his name that begins with C, what that means? Where it came from?
Yes, it's Swami Chidbrahmananda. It means bliss, the bliss of the knowledge of God. Chit is knowledge or intelligence. Chit Brahma is God, the divine, and Ananda is love or bliss. So it's a bliss in the divine knowledge.
Thank you.
Surely. Now I don't know how you structure this, Joshua, but I'm willing to hang as long as people want to ask questions or talk or chit chat. If you have an absolute ending time, that's fine also. But I make myself available if you want, if anybody wants to.
No, that would be, thank you for that. That'd be great. Yeah, if anybody wants to stay on, because I definitely have some more questions. For instance, so you mentioned like John 1 being one of your favorite passage, or maybe you didn't say that, but just you mentioned John 1 as being a great passage. What do you think about the word becoming flesh? How do you see it? I think like I'm not saying the incarnation is right, you know, but like it does seem from a universal perspective or whatever, but like from a Christian perspective, that God became flesh. It just, how do you get around the sensory being illusory in that sense? It seems like the sensory for Christians, at least, it was like literally embodied in Jesus. What do you think about that?
No, I absolutely agree. The notion of Jesus, of God incarnating, is as old as religion. My difference would be, and it wouldn't be a difference for me because I'm not going to insist on it, but the notion that it is the word that has manifested many times. He has manifested as Rama, he has manifested as Krishna, he has manifested as Buddha, he has manifested as any of the great teachers, and has always taught the same principles, has always taught the same ideal, although his methodologies and practices for getting there depended on the culture and time within which he manifested at that time. But that, as John says there, the word has always existed. Mm-hmm. And he does not say that the word only manifested a single time. Mm-hmm. You know, and immediately somebody will say, well, what about when it says, you know, I am the way, the truth, and the life, nobody comes to the Father but through me? I will say absolutely true. But you've got to be careful not to think that Jesus is talking about the same me that you are. That his me, he was the Father. He and the Father were one. He was an eternal self that was not a personality, that was not a body, but was a window through which the divine was clearly seen without obstruction. And that I is the only way to return to the beloved. That is the only way to get back, is to become that very one same window through which God manifests, with no obstruction of egoistic self. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody else want to jump in?
I just want to say, I love that, what you just said, because my whole life, I have stumbled over that Jesus is the only one. I just don't, there's just no common sense in that to me, because we are a slice of humanity, and we're just one slice. And I grew up in a family of missionaries who spent generations going out to, you know, to take Christianity to the world. So there was the sense that, you know, this was the one true experience or the one true manifestation of God, that we had to, you know, share it. And I just think God is so much bigger than that. And this is our experience. I was born in America. I wasn't born in Saudi Arabia. If I were born in Saudi Arabia, my experience would be Muslim, and I would be having that experience through Muhammad. But it's so hard to reconcile with the Christian scripture. And so I love what you just said.
Then it
just
makes
perfect sense. Everything, to me, it's, and this is, you know, probably not the right way, but to me, things have to make sense. They have to make common sense to my mind and to my heart. And that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it made sense to me also. But the thing that one even has to be aware of always is that even if Jesus is the only way for someone, for you or for Tom or whoever, that's all right too. You know, they can believe and structure their life around that. And the divine mother, the father will bring them home. You know, that is his one desire, is that reunion with each and every one of us. And so he will use that to bring them home also. We don't need to convince people to find satisfaction in the same way we find satisfaction. You know, in the Vedanta, and that's kind of my word for sort of this unitive eternal religion, the sages through the thousands of years have found 4 paths that lead to this unitive experience. They have found the path of Jnana knowledge, Jnana Yoga, they call it, the path of knowledge. And that is the answer to the question, who am I? You go inside and keep asking that question. Who is it that's looking for God? Who is it that's interested in truth? Who is it that's listening to my ear? Who is it that's watching my mind? You know, and so it's a set of practices for somebody who approaches truth in that form, you know, asking, who am I? The second one is the Raja Yoga, and this is the path of mind control, and it's the path of trying to calm the mind to the level that you can see the moon reflected perfectly within it, not in its multiplicity of shards, but in its wholeness and oneness. And so it's a set of practices for you trying to get enough control of the mind where when one thought ends, before the next thought begins, through that little tiny space there, God can be clearly seen. And so it's a set of practices for doing that. The third one is the practice of karma yoga, or the practice of action. And that is, you give up the idea of past and future, and you do everything in the present moment as worship to God. You do not, as an offering to God, you don't assign causality to anything. So I'm not filling out the form in order to get my license at the DMV. Filling out the form itself is my act of worship. So I do it perfectly, and I do it accurately, and I do it carefully. And when I give it to the person across the counter there, I'm giving it to my beloved. This is my offering to you. And it's to live in that awareness, so that when Jesus says, he who gave a glass of water to the least of these gave a glass of water to me. It's that practice in everything that you do. You do it in the moment as worship to your beloved, remembering God always and in all things, and refusing to recognize anything as possibly being not God. And then the last one is the path of devotion. And that is what Christianity is. Christianity is an exact, and I say this may be the one controversial thing I sometimes say. Christianity brought nothing new to the world of religion. All of the practices and teachings of Christianity existed thousands of years before that manifestation of it as bhakti yoga, as the path of devotion. But the avatar, or the incarnation of God, was never defined as a personality, this and only this. However, having Jesus as the only manifestation of God is not the problem of Christianity. It's also the problem of Islam. It's also the problem of people who follow Krishna in Hinduism. All religions who practice, as a matter of fact, in the first paragraph on the scriptures of teaching the path of devotion, their first warning is, do not think that your wife is the most beautiful wife of all. You know, know that your wife is your most beautiful wife of all. You know, but that not all of us will be married to the same wife. And so that's the danger of the path, the emotional path, the path of devotion, is that devotion tends toward fanaticism. And so all of us will, in tendency, because of ego, will need to attach our I to our devotion, and we'll need to make it the best devotion, the highest devotion, and then consequently, in the end, the only devotion. And that's what gets us into trouble. So it's not a problem with Christianity. because not all Christians will say that same thing. And it's not that it's not true. You see, it's irrelevant whether Jesus is the only way or not. We leave that to God. If we believe and live in a world where Jesus is the only way, then do your very best to be like him. Give up everything for him. Go. That's the important thing. Love like you have never loved before, so that when I look at you, I will know you're Jesus. Be that. Live that. You are that. Fabulous. It's not my place to tell you differently. And I can tell you, if you live like Jesus, you won't have to tell people differently. They will be very happy to see him or her in you, in all that you do. And so those four paths have all led to, and you can't say experience, because in a union there is no experiencer. So it's not an experience, but that unitive, there isn't a word for it. We don't have a word. Word requires vibration, and there's no vibration there. There's unity. There's no time.
I had a question. You sort of anticipated what I was going to ask, which is that this devotion leads to fanaticism, and it seems most of the major religions have that to a degree. Is that a flaw that has to be dealt with within each religion, or how do we solve that, or is that unsolvable?
Well, it depends on how you're going to look at it. Solvable suggests that there's a problem. The problem is not fanaticism. The problem is ego. Anytime that we attach the sense of me and mine to anything, it's going to become a problem. In the form of religion, it becomes fanaticism. You know, in the form of politics, it becomes nationalism. You know, in the form of sexuality, it becomes, whatever. You understand. It's like anytime you take that small I and make it the defining important feature of anything, you're going to have trouble. So it's not a problem of religion, it's a problem of ourself. We have to expand our sense of I to include all that is, because that is the only truth. I am. Anything that we connect to that is going to be a problem. I'm an American, I'm 50, I'm a man, I'm straight, I'm gay, anything that we attach to that is going to be the problem in our life, because it is inaccurate. It is not who we are. I am you and you are me. And my love to you and my service of you is my worship to that self, to that beloved, that I am, that exists in each one of us. That I am, that each one of us is a reflection of. And so the problem's not one of religion, it's a problem of ego, and that belongs to each one of us not knowing who we are and what it means to be in the image of the beloved, the image of the divine.
So Dwayne put a question in the chat that said, but if the love we have for others is only a reflection of ourselves, isn't that the ultimate ego trip? And can we love anyone in whom we don't see ourselves reflected?
Well, it's not love if you're not seeing the self reflected in it. Yes, it is ultimate egoism, but an egoism, a sense of I, which is what egoism is, that includes all, is not problematic. So yes, seeing God in ourself and seeing God in each other, it ultimately would be egoism in its fullest sense, but because it would be all inclusive, and because it would inspire nothing but giving, caring, nurturing, helping, patience, all of those ideals of love, it's not a problem. So there's two ways to go. You can either eliminate ego in your life, stomp it out, which is very difficult to do, or you can expand it infinitely. One is the practice of neti neti, they say in the scriptures, I am not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, and you back into God, as it were. And the other one is, oh yes, I'm that, I'm you, I'm that, I'm that, I'm that, and you walk forward, full embrace into the Divine Mother or into God. So it's two practices. One is to diminish ego to nothing. The other is to grow it to infinite size. So it's funny, I asked that question of my teacher in my 6th month in the monastery. I was like, this seems so egotistical. And he says, yes, it is. But grow your ego so that it's so vast that it includes everyone. So,
Are there any other questions?
all right. My email address is monkotronic@gmail.com. I always encourage people, if you want to write or ask or inquire or just want encouragement or whatever, you're welcome to write me. I try to respond to everyone.
I'm going to
So
put it in the chat. MONK.
OTRONIC@gmail.com. And if you do a search on YouTube for Monkotronic, I do a daily vlog, which is anywhere from 2 minutes to 10 minutes. It's me out there with my spiritual pom-poms. Go. So
I was going to ask you if you did podcasts. So now I know that. That's great.
Yeah. And I try to keep it path neutral, or at least keep an awareness of all paths when I throw things up there, to just encourage people to keep asking and keep looking and be excited about what is. So.
That's great.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Surely. My delight, as always. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing everyone again. Take care.
We look forward to it.